It wasn't a good night for Liverpool's Till on Saturday, as he was beaten up and submitted by Dricus du Plessis at UFC 282 inside the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. After the fight, Diaz took to his Instagram stories to mock Till and say that he sucks. Diaz is now a free agent since competing in his last contractual fight with the UFC in September at UFC 279. There is no news on what he will do next, but there is speculation that he will go box. As for Till, he has lost 3 in a row, being submitted in his last 2 fights, after going unbeaten in his first 6 fights of his UFC career, which led to a title shot. He has lost 5 of his previous 6. The future doesn't look too bright for Till at the moment. However, UFC President Dana White did not seem too worried about the fighter from Liverpool after his loss, saying that he didn't think his stock drops much at all because of their fight of the night. Paddy Pimblett's win at UFC 282, tagged as the worst decision in UFC history by top fighters. Paddy Pimblett eked out a close unanimous decision victory over Jared Gordon in the co-main event of UFC 282. Pimblett's decision win garnered backlash from observers. However, the baddie insisted that the fight wasn't close at all and that he knew heading into the third that he was ahead by 2 rounds. "I knew for a fact I won the first 2 rounds pretty easily," the baddie said. Let's hear it from the main man himself.
You don't think it was a close fight at all?
Not at all. I won the first 2 rounds and then posted in the third. I knew I was 2 rounds up, so I didn't want to do nothing dangerous and risk losing the fight. I knew for a fact I won the first 2 rounds pretty easily.
Paddy Pimblett remains undefeated in the octagon, but the majority of people on social media believe that he should have lost. UFC bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling believes that Jared Gordon deserved the victory. His sentiments were shared by former UFC superstar Nate Diaz and Henry Cejudo, who called the result the worst decision in UFC history. Dana White shocks the world by announcing light heavyweight championship fight for UFC 283 main event. Minutes after the main event of UFC 282, UFC President Dana White announced that former light heavyweight champion Glover Teixeira will fight for the vacant championship against top contender Jamahal at UFC 283 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It was a random and shocking announcement, mainly because the UFC 282 main event for the light heavyweight title ended in a split draw. White did not like the main event, calling it terrible. However, when reporters asked what he plans to do next with the title, he explained, "You do Glover versus Jamahal in Brazil for the vacant title. Done."
I don't even know. I started to zone out after like fucking 3 rounds, so, you know. I heard that Ankalaev is upset and whatever. What do you want me to do, you know? You got beat up the first 2 rounds and you know, you took him to the ground, you started, you know, what are you going to do?
But I guess the question is, what do you do now, right? I mean, vacant title, a split.
You do Glover versus Jamahal in Brazil for the vacant title.
Is that done?
Done.
Hill reacted to his title shot on his social media. Take a look.
Hey, yo, let's go, bruh. Title shot. The goal coming back to Grand Rapids. 6 weeks. I'm going overseas. I'm storming in there. You already know. I've been barbecuing Brazil for weeks. Let's go. I'm ready, baby. Let's go.
Teixeira was scheduled to headline UFC 282 before his opponent Jiri Prochazka suffered a severe shoulder injury. He is coming off a Fight of the Year candidate with Prochazka at UFC 275, in which he lost his title via 5th-round submission. Dana White criticizes Jared Gordon and Herb Dean about Pimblett fight. UFC President Dana White has shared his thoughts on who's to blame for the controversial ending to Paddy Pimblett versus Jared Gordon at UFC 282 last night. Unlike Pimblett's previous UFC fights, which have all ended with a finish, this one was far from an entertaining spectacle in the eyes of many fans, and that wasn't helped by the controversial ending. If you ask White, he thinks Gordon and Dean should take the blame. "I thought that Jared Gordon's game plan going into the 3rd round was horrible. White said at the UFC 282 post-fight press conference. Listen closely to Dana's comments.
He felt like he had the first 2 rounds, and he went in and pushed him against the fence. And I got to go after the ref too. You know, a big fight, co-main event, 3rd round, crowd's going crazy, and you're going to let him stand against the fence the entire fight. You know, but these are these things that happen. What are you going to do? Horrible game plan by Gordon. You know, the ref let it happen, and he threw the fight away. You know, he was doing great in that fight. He should have fought the 3rd round.
With the win, Paddy Pimblett moves to 4-0 in the UFC. As for Jared Gordon, he has now lost 2 of his last 3 fights and may want to consider taking Dana White's advice if he is to get back in the win column in his next UFC outing. Michael Chandler is very pleased to learn latest Conor McGregor update. UFC lightweight contender Michael Chandler has given his thoughts on UFC president Dana White's comments about a Conor McGregor fight. During a recent interview with MMA Junkie, Chandler was asked whether or not White's comments give him a sense of satisfaction. Dana knows it, the UFC knows it, Conor knows it. I've become the most exciting guy in the UFC, bar none, hands down. Chandler said, let's listen to Iron.
Dana is the boss of the UFC. Obviously, Conor has a tendency to also, pick his opponents too, or have a good conversation with the UFC and say, hey, this is who I think, this is who you think. Let's find a common ground. Let's see where the fight actually lands. But there's one thing that's undeniable. Dana knows it. The UFC knows it. Conor knows it. I've become the most exciting guy in the UFC, bar none, hands down, and it's really is humbling. I don't say that to impress people or say that with a kind of a narcissistic attitude, but I do go out there and I lay it on the line.
McGregor is expected to return at welterweight for his next Octagon appearance. He hasn't fought since UFC 264 and has put on significant mass during his fighting hiatus. While nothing is set in stone until the contract is signed, it sounds like a McGregor and Chandler fight could be one of the next moves on the UFC's radar. The mixed martial arts world is stunned by Raul Rosas Jr.'s explosive UFC debut. UFC's youngest fighter, Raul Rosas Jr., has left the entire roster impressed on his debut against Jay Perrin. The 18-year-old high schooler looked absolutely flawless, submitting his opponent with a rear naked choke within the opening frame. Top UFC athletes are awed by the heights Rosas Jr. is scaling at such a young age. Even Conor McGregor left pleasing comments for the Mexican fighter. Raul Rosas, great debut, watching you. UFC bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling is seemingly relieved as he will likely move up a weight class by the time Rosas Jr. makes a title bid at 135 pounds. Belal Muhammad even called Dana White out. Dana should check his grades at school first before giving the 50 Ds. And Brendan Schaub, who had nothing but praise for the youngster. Marc Goddard finally speaks out on his Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira stoppage. There is nothing referee Marc Goddard would change about his stoppage of Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira at UFC 281 this past November. Goddard told Mike Vaughn of MMA Junkie that he feels very good after the decision he made. At the end of the day, my job is to act instinctually and correctly to protect the guys, continued Goddard. Let's listen to the man himself.
About the Israel Adesanya fight versus Alex Pereira, right? In hindsight, how do you feel about the stoppage and everything, kind of the fallout of that fight?
I feel very good.
Yeah.
Israel is, I think, he's a great guy. I think he was a fantastic champion. I'm not just saying it because I'm here. I like the guy a lot. I like all the fighters. That's my job. I'm down the line. If I'd done that fight again, 11 times out of 10, I wouldn't change a thing.
Goddard understands that Adesanya may have wanted to go out on his shield, but the referee continues to stress that the protection of the fighters is his priority. A month removed from their fight, Adesanya and Pereira have expressed interest in a potential rematch in the near future. That's all for today's video. If you want to know the latest UFC news, subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications bell, and click the like button so you don't miss any details about the upcoming fights. Thanks for watching. See you soon.